borrowed riffs, bold confessions, and rock history colliding. This story shows how one unforgettable musical idea sparked a chain reaction across two legendary bands. Minimalism and arena rock collided in dramatic fashion in 1972, when Pete Townshend unveiled Baba O'Riley. The track's looping, arpeggiated figure, often mistaken for a synth part, was built around the experimental concepts of avant-garde composer Terry Riley, and became the relentless rhythmic backbone of the song. Instead of a traditional synthesizer, Townshend crafted the part on a Lowry Berkshire Deluxe TB01 home organ, using its marimba repeat feature to create that bubbling, almost mechanical pulse that listeners still associate with early electronic music. As far as hooks go, this one was almost unfairly powerful. It snags your ear from the first seconds, pulls you straight into the track's world, and refuses to let go for the entire 5-minute journey. No wonder it helped launch the album, whose next into the status of a milestone release and cemented Baba O'Riley as a rock anthem that generations of guitarists and producers would study, and sometimes quietly borrow from. One of those captivated listeners was producer Tom Werman. He heard Townshend's keyboard line not just as a cool part, but as something he could repurpose in his own work. Later in the 1970s, when he was in the studio with Cheap Trick, that hypnotic Baba O'Riley pattern was still echoing in his mind. And here's where it gets controversial. He liked it so much, he decided to lift the idea outright and drop it behind a different band's songs. The light bulb first switched on while Werman was producing Surrender, a track on Cheap Trick's 1978 album Heaven Tonight. Guitarist Rick Nielsen had written Surrender as a kind of rock nursery rhyme, capturing how a teenager sees the odd behavior of his parents. Late at night, playing an unplugged electric guitar at home, Nielsen started strumming a rhythm and singing, "Mother told me, yes, she told me I'd meet girls like you," and realized the melody had that sing-song quality you might associate with childhood, but filtered through the lens of a leather-jacketed high school kid. As he continued, he wrote the words in a casual stream of consciousness flow, weaving in lines that were exaggerated yet rooted in his real life. The famous sentiment about "Mommy's alright, Daddy's alright, they're just a little bit weird" reflected a universal joke. Whose parents don't seem strange at some point? Nielsen certainly thought his did. And that's especially entertaining coming from a musician known for wild guitars, including a 5-necked instrument that looks more like a sculpture than a standard piece of gear. In the studio, as Nielsen hammered out the opening chords of Surrender on his electric guitar, Werman's producer instincts started firing. The song's theme, youthful alienation, confusion, and fascination with adult weirdness, naturally called Townshend's work to mind, since Pete had long been one of Werman's biggest musical heroes. And this is the part most people miss. Werman didn't just take inspiration. He decided to directly transplant the essence of that Baba O'Riley riff underneath Cheap Trick's power chords. He later admitted without hesitation that he had plain stolen the idea. In his own words, he lifted the keyboard riff concept from Baba O'Riley and threaded a similar pattern into Surrender, because it both sounded great and locked in perfectly with Nielsen's distinctive guitar work. Werman considered that decision his main creative stamp on the track, a bold move that raises a modern question about where homage ends and copying begins. Surrender turned out to be a perfect way to kick off Heaven Tonight. The album leaned hard into power pop territory, with carefully crafted radio-ready production that made Cheap Trick feel like a band built for big stages and bigger crowds. Werman recalls being thrilled with how Surrender came together. Everyone in the studio could feel they'd captured something special. While it didn't explode to the top of the charts, it earned heavy radio rotation and quickly became one of those songs people recognized even if they couldn't name the album. Positioning Surrender as the first track on side 1 sent a clear message. The band and the label both believed in it. Traditionally, that slot is reserved for what you hope is the strongest or most attention-grabbing song on the record. Interestingly, Werman pointed out that Heaven Tonight was packed with contenders, so although Surrender opened the album, it was part of a deep bench of songs that showcased just how strong Cheap Trick's writing had become. Released as a single in June 1978, Surrender pushed Cheap Trick into the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 62. That may sound modest, but for a band still on the rise, it was a crucial breakthrough and helped Heaven Tonight climb to number 48 on the album charts. In Japan, the record performed even better, reaching number 11. A sign that the group's energy and hooks were connecting strongly with audiences outside the US. The success in Japan caught the attention of executives at Epic, the band's label. Sensing an opportunity, the label's team in Japan decided to release Cheap Trick at Budokan, a live album capturing the band's performances at Tokyo's famed Budokan Arena. This choice would prove pivotal. Live albums don't always change a band's fortunes, but in this case it became a powerful amplifier for everything Cheap Trick had built so far. When Cheap Trick at Budokan finally arrived in the US in February 1979, it didn't blow up overnight. Instead, it climbed slowly but steadily, fueled by radio favorites like I Want You to Want Me, and the band's punchy take on the Fats Domino classic, Ain't That a Shame. As those songs found a wider audience, Surrender also benefited, gaining renewed attention as fans dug deeper into the band's catalog and rediscovered Heaven Tonight. Meanwhile, Werman and Cheap Trick already had their next move ready. Their fourth studio album, Dream Police, was finished and waiting in the wings. The label, however, held it back so Budokan could have room to breathe on the charts. That delay accidentally set up Dream Police to land at exactly the right moment. Just as Cheap Trick's profile was surging and new listeners were eager for more, Dream Police showcased a band stretching its creative muscles. The songs ran longer, the arrangements grew more ambitious, and the production leaned into larger-than-life textures, including orchestral elements that went beyond straightforward rock instrumentation. For the title track, Werman once again revisited the same well of inspiration that had worked so well before, that hypnotic Baba O'Reilly-style riff. He later noted that a version of the synthesizer-like figure reappeared in Dream Police, this time slowed down to half-time. The echo of Townsend's idea was still there, but reframed in a darker, more cinematic context, matching the song's anxious, almost paranoid energy. It was as if the DNA of Baba O'Reilly had been spliced into Cheap Trick's sound a second time, raising the stakes on the question of homage, influence, and originality. One major difference, however, was the use of real orchestral players. Instead of relying entirely on keyboards or synth textures, Nielsen wrote a genuine string arrangement for Dream Police, giving the track a sweeping, dramatic quality. Werman has pointed out that this was likely the only time they used a full string section on a Cheap Trick song, aside from an instance where he layered double cello on Auf Wiedersehen to reinforce the bass line and give it extra weight. Commercially, Dream Police marked a new high point. Heaven Tonight had already shown growth, selling around 700,000 to 800,000 copies, quite a leap from its predecessor In Color, which moved roughly 300,000. Dream Police pushed things further, crossing the million-sold mark and confirming that the band was not just a cult favorite, but a genuine mainstream success. The trajectory was clear. Cheap Trick was on a steady climb, and the blend of catchy hooks, theatrical production, and clever borrowing was working in their favor. The article's author, Elizabeth Swan, writes from a place of deep musical obsession. A devoted fan of prog folk, she has chased stories from remote corners of the world for outlets like Prog, Wired, and Popular Mechanics, bringing niche scenes and quirky details to a wider audience. Her personal treasures include rare reel-to-reel live recordings of legends Bert Jansch and John Renbourn, along with an unexpectedly charming collection of souvenir teaspoons picked up while traveling through the Appalachian region. When she isn't wrapped around the neck of her Stella 12-string acoustic guitar, Swan is often found hunched over a workbench with a soldering iron in hand, tweaking and modifying gear. That mix of technical curiosity and musical passion helps explain why she gravitates towards stories like this one. Tales where sound design, gear choices, and creative risk all intersect. It's the kind of perspective that notices not just what a riff sounds like, but how it was created, how it was reused, and why it still provokes debates decades later. So here's the big question. When a producer openly admits, "I just stole that riff," is it a playful nod to influence, or a line crossed into ethical gray area? Does reusing a musical idea this obviously count as creative tribute, or does it undercut originality in a way that bothers you? Share your take. Is this kind of borrowing part of what keeps rock evolving? Or should artists draw a harder boundary when inspiration starts sounding a little too familiar?